Spiritual amnesia. What does this mean to us? When God gives us a revelation, a spiritual revelation for who He is, we recognize, but later on, we forget. I look at the book of Daniel and I see this pure thing. A lot of times when we focus on the book of Daniel, we're looking at Daniel, we're looking at Meshach, Meshach, and Abednego. We're looking at when they was tossed in that fiery furnace. And Nebuchadnezzar says, I see a fourth man in there, and it looks like the Son of God. But today, I want to focus in on King Nebuchadnezzar. How he had spiritual amnesia. How he had recognized the power of God and who God was, that he was the one true king, but later forgot. Let me share the story as it unfolds. Spiritual amnesia. As we see in the book of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar has this simple thing. Not one, but multiple times. It could be just like us when God gives us a revelation. Book of Daniel, we see in Daniel 1, when Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And he has this dream and he doesn't have anybody to interpret it. And he simply goes to the front. He looks for everybody and he finds Daniel. Daniel predicts this dream. Nebuchadnezzar makes this revelation saying, you truly serve a God of gods, the King of kings. But if you take it down a little bit more further, later on in the book of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar gets the same revelation through these three bold, mighty men that would not bow down to a statue. For the same dream that Daniel predicted, King Nebuchadnezzar received it, caught amnesia to it, still went on his plan, and then when Meshach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't bow down, he caught another revelation when he seen the Son of God be the fourth man in that furnace. Then after that, there's another dream where King Nebuchadnezzar again catches this spiritual amnesia. He's seeking the people again to predict the same dream. Not the same dream, but a dream. Meanwhile, before, Daniel was the only one that was able to predict this dream. But yet King Nebuchadnezzar went to people. How many times do God gives us a revelation, we tend to forget, and then we tend to take our own route, our own people, and then find out at the end that heaven rules. Because simply in the Bible, again, it shows us that God is overall. We need to bring it to Him. We need to keep that revelation knowing that He is higher. He's over everything. And as King Nebuchadnezzar could be just like us, where we could have this spiritual amnesia. When God has given you a spiritual awakening in life, you recognize, you verbally declared, your God is the God. He actually had everybody bow down to his God, their God. Meshach, Meshach, and Abednego's God, not the statue. He turned it away. So he had this revelation. And what I like about in Daniel 4, in the 4th chapter, it basically says that he has this other dream. God is going to deal with him, discipline. You know why? Because King Nebuchadnezzar had this me conscious. Oh, I built this. I did this. And in Daniel 4, God gave Nebuchadnezzar another dream. And in this dream, again, he seeks people. But once again, Daniel's the only one that can interpret this dream. And it's about a tree that reaches heaven and all these things. And he's frightened about it because Daniel's like, man, I really don't want to tell you this, but I have to tell you this dream means about you. That God is going to cut the branches off and everything. And the real true reason of this, when you read Daniel, you read the book of Daniel, you'll see that the reason why the Lord has did this is because King Nebuchadnezzar had this me complex. Oh, I did this. This was me that built this. I am successful. I did this. Regardless of, he had no regards. He overlooked where God's grace was in his life. That God did it. It wasn't him. How many times that we say, oh, I built this. I did this. I did this. In reality, it was God's favor over your life. And we must have this revelation. We must not keep this spiritual amnesia, because this is the simple tool that will allow us to keep our eyes on Him. And when we think that we're the ones doing it, God will give us a dream and says, you know what, I'm going to hold back. But what I love about it, grace is written throughout the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And in this book, if you read Daniel 4, it was God's grace that says, you're gonna go through these 7 periods of trials, but I'm gonna give you it back if you do these things that I asked you to do, and you take care of the needy, and you live accordingly towards how God wants you to live. This was the dream from the Lord to King Nebuchadnezzar, and I love this because it was God's grace. God could have written him off. He could have cut him out and said, I'm done with you, man. I gave you a first revelation. You acknowledged. I gave you a second revelation. You acknowledged, and I gave you a third revelation. And now you acknowledge again. But God is a God of chances, and he gave him another chance. And I want you to be encouraged today that it may be you sitting in a position where you said, oh, I did this, I built this, I got this successful, it's me, and totally amnesia where God has his favor over you. And maybe we need to start saying we, him, and I. Or maybe you sit in a position where, you're sitting in this season of trials. I want you to know that today, that God's hand says, I still here for you. And I love it because in the Bible, in this book, in the book of Daniel, it clearly states that then he would know that heaven rules. Heaven rules over your situation. Heaven rules over your relationship. Heaven rules over your finances. I don't know what is struggling right now, but you need to declare it that heaven rules. Don't let the distractions take you down. And don't get spiritual amnesia. Keep all eyes on him. Love you guys.